Are you ready to elevate your game as a corporate retirement plan advisor? Join me, Dal Degan, on Gray to Great, the podcast where we dig into what really makes a difference in this industry. From prospecting and gaining referral business to challenger selling, tech adoption, and cutting-edge marketing, Gray to Great has you covered. Every episode, I'll be chatting with a plan advisor like you, breaking down the strategies that separate the leaders from the rest of the pack. So get ready for real insights, real conversation that facilitate real growth. Because in sales, there is no gray area. Welcome to our latest episode of Gray to Great. I am joined today by Virginia Ryan, who is with 401k plan professionals in the Twin Cities, a fellow Midwesterner like me. And Virginia's going to share with us today some inspiring stories. We've had a chance to chat a little bit, including at the recent Napa show in Las Vegas, where we met for the first time. And we're chatting about the journey that Virginia has been on personally, as well as the journey that Virginia facilitates and her team for their clients. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this. Our audience typically does, not just about best practices, but about some inspiring stories that lead people from many different angles and other industries into this world of retirement plan advising. So Virginia, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. So maybe a good place to start is just right there, that origin story that you started to share with us a little bit in Las Vegas when we first met. I'd love to hear about your origin story and what inspired you when at the time, I believe you were in the transportation industry as a flight attendant when you started down this journey. I'd love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. My story is definitely not linear, but my resume is all over the place. But I have been in the 401k world now about 13 years. But as a young 24-year-old, I became a flight attendant after I was bartending and a friend told me to go give it a whirl. So I did that. And I'll never forget, my first W-2 was $19,000. And luckily I had some supportive family who helped out a little bit, but I was very frugal, and they actually auto-enrolled at the airline at 3%. And I called my dad up and I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, stay in, got to do it." And that was what I did. So not making very much money, staying auto-enrolled, playing around on the website a little bit, but I surely had no acumen for 401k plans, for what the investments even were. But, just that little bit of advice from my dad made me stick with it.
I love to hear stories of good parental advice. As a parent, that warms my heart, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So talk a little bit about that, if you could, Virginia, a bit more about that feeling of not feeling like this is your vocabulary, coming from a different world, which many of us do when we first get exposed to the retirement plan options that our 401ks and other options provide to us. It can be intimidating. It can feel like a different language. How did you both overcome that? And then how does that inform how you counsel your own clients?
Yeah. It really, we're not taught this stuff, and hopefully soon, high school students will be required to take a personal finance class, which in Minnesota that just passed. So
it's a great idea.
We're so thankful for that. Yes. Yeah. But I really take that experience and bring it in front of clients because, we're not supposed to know this stuff. And what needs to happen is open conversation. I like to start out every meeting with a participant. If you have any burning questions, there's no such thing as a silly question. And then let's just dive right in. And I think no one ever did that for me, certainly not in high school. And then, in my working career, I was kind of always taught to have a job. So I always worked and saved a little bit. But really, there's so many people that don't even know what question to ask. And, a website's not really going to teach them how to do that. A call center certainly is not going to teach them how to do that. And so in our practice, we we kind of call ourselves, financial counselors or financial therapists. Like what we think is the basics is certainly not the basics for most people. So, regardless of income and where you are in your career, everybody can use a little one-on-one attention. And
Yes.
that's what we do.
I love the metaphor of financial therapy. Tell me, how do you go from, let's say I'm one of your clients and I'm feeling that often, very common of often felt intimidation factor when I look at the vernacular around retirement plans, I look at all the options. What do you use as a conversation starter to get me comfortable as a client that's maybe not from this world and therefore intimidated a bit by all the options?
Yeah, we'll start on the record keeping website. They've come a long way in 10 years, and some basic retirement calculators are a great way to start and just talk about what it looks like to pay yourself when you decide to stop working. But, a lot of people, we kind of start with what's your income? What are you saving now? What
Right.
have you saved? What are your three biggest bills? And what is that going to look like when you get into retirement? I mean, some people have never been asked those questions, honestly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And it's certainly a great place to just start just a very human conversation about what are your hopes, fears, anxieties, your aspirations, your desires. And I love even that metaphor you used of paying yourself. Even that probably gets people to think differently about, oh, yeah, I'm really gearing up to be able to pay myself in my retirement years. Do you find that that breaks down some of that resistance or intimidation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about debt a lot too. I mean, you can look up stats on the average American's debt, and it's pretty, shocking sometimes. So, um, we talk about loans and when and if it's the right place to get a loan, right? A 401k loan. I think I think people like having just some face to face time with somebody to break it all down. And
Mhm.
really, the only place they're going to get that is through work and work savings plan, unless they have a brother or somebody, a friend of a friend who's a financial advisor. But most people do not have access to a financial advisor.
Right, right. And so access to those conversations and to that kind of advice, you need to meet them where they are, right? And help them get comfortable with the options and ultimately make good decisions. You mentioned also earlier the role of the record keeper, which feels like, as I've become more familiar with this industry as myself an outsider coming from the world of software and now private equity, I didn't grow up in the retirement plan advisory community, much like you. I came to it later. And I've heard increasingly that the record keeper role is so vital and often underappreciated. If you could expand on that.
Sure, yeah. That's where I started my career. Kind of worked my way up, did some 401k sales support, and then got licensed on the sales side and did some internal wholesaling, and then moved to the service side. So I did that. At the time, I didn't really think too hard about it, but I do think it gave me a really good um, foundation for how this all works. And um, I didn't get much participant experience from either of those roles, right? You don't talk to the end user. So when I got to the advising side, um, that's where I had all this knowledge, right, behind the scenes at the record keepers I worked for. And then, you know, helping people understand that participant website, that app, it's a great starting point.
Right. Yes, that makes
And
sense. That makes a lot of
yep,
sense. Yeah, it's a starting point to get educated and start to develop their vocabulary and ask, I would imagine, therefore, more purposeful, better questions of you when they have access to you.
yep, exactly. And the
It's easy to do
websites
their
do
research.
matter. They do matter. Those tools, those initial front page, the apps. I mean, I log on to, the usual suspects every day. So I do appreciate good technology, that's for sure.
And I love a good movie reference with The Usual Suspects too. So you shared with us a story when we met at Napa that I thought was really engaging. The story about one of your clients who is a professional long haul trucker who you had a conversation with, I think, while in transit in his rig. I'd love to share that with the listeners.
Yeah, there's twofold there. I have enrolled somebody while they're driving a truck. We have a trucking client here in the Midwest who they auto enroll a good portion of the staff. However, they don't auto enroll the truck drivers.
Okay.
And so we really put our information front and center for them, and it's wonderful. I've helped them log on while they're driving. I've done a one-on-one meeting with a trucker who's at his rest stop in the back of his truck bed, and we're talking about what it's going to look like when he decides to stop driving, and it's I think it's really well received, and I know our client is so thankful that we take the time to do that.
That's great. I love it. And that client was the trucking company where he was employed? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, him and I will once a year, we'll revisit our conversations. We'll talk about his plans. So yeah, it's nice. You build relationships that way.
Yes. Well, it's what better example of meeting people where they are, both emotionally, intellectually, and physically, if they happen to be driving their rig at the time.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. And so tell me your firm, the other unique feature of your firm is you are made up entirely of women in the plan advisory community. I'd love to hear you expand on that and how you came to that design and what the dynamic has been for all of you.
Yeah. After my time at the Record Keepers, I felt advising was like a great next step. And having worked with a lot of advisors in the service role, so the relationship manager role, right? You're meeting with advisors, you're doing that. I started to kind of really think through how I wanted to work as an advisor, and I found 401k plan professionals, and luckily they took me on. And the all-female team has been just fantastic. And the other thing I love is that we all do everything. So, which I found is a little bit unique in the plan advisor space. So we all take the lead on clients. We do everything from the C-suite investment committee meeting all the way down to the participant education, and we like it that way. We want to see the end user. We want to talk about our experience with the C-suite. We want to be really educated on what their employees, need and feel. And workplace retirement plans are, a huge benefit to the average American worker. So we don't want to lose that.
So, Virginia, do you find often that as you talk with the rank and file in an organization among your clients, that because you're working also with the C-level as well as all the employees, that you get insights that you share with the C-level folks that maybe they weren't tuned into about plan options or other dynamics they should know about?
Yes, absolutely. Those one-on-one meetings, anytime we host a webinar for a client, those are all tracked. And we have a marketing person on staff too that helps us do all that data and makes everything look really nice. But that's a huge, agenda item when we do our plan reviews, because, they tell us certain things, right? And of course, we keep things confidential if need be, but it is really nice to report on how many people we talked to, what were the top 5 questions, where could we improve for education, next, 6 months. So yeah, those are really helpful, especially because we collect data too, as far as who we meet with and those types of things. So
yeah, that's really valuable. You're giving the executive leadership teams of your clients another set of eyes and ears into what their employees care about, what they're struggling with, what their aspirations are. Does that sometimes lead to modifications of their plan structures to better suit the needs of their employees?
Absolutely. It definitely has. When we review plan design, or maybe we're shortening eligibility, or maybe it's even creating a longer eligibility for certain reasons. So absolutely, it
That's great.
dictates a lot.
Okay, good. Um, so now, as with all this advice that we're talking about, that you have to dispense for, whether it's a younger Virginia Ryan as you were making the transition from flight attendant into plan advisor, well, record keeper and then plan advisor. I often do this, and we wonder if I could go back and talk to my 20-something self. Of course, most of the speech would be about growing up a little faster, right, and maturing. So what advice would you have either for yourself in that early stage of your career, or other plan advisors? And I imagine this happens with some regularity, that they approach you trying to tap into your experience. What do you advise them on?
Great question. I think looking back at myself, I carried a little bit of shame graduating college and just not knowing what I wanted to do. And I really tried lots of different things. And I'm a curious person by nature, so I asked a lot of questions. And if you were to say to a 24-year-old, oh, you're going to be a 401k plan advisor for the rest of your days, I would have said, what? No. Um, so I do think you keep your mind present, make a few goals, and when it comes down to it, ask questions, because that's how we learn. And I kind of joke with my kids. My least favorite thing is when someone says, well, that's just how we've always done it. It's
Right.
like, I don't, what if that doesn't, make sense? So I think that's what I would say to myself. Being an advisor now 3 years, um, I, I really have so much to learn still. Um, but I think I've turned the corner in my efficiencies at work, right? Using tools and kind of getting to know our clients. But um, I really think plan advisors get to see and experience so much of the working American. And
Yeah.
that's my favorite, right? And people are just so interesting to me. So as long as you're curious and you want to learn more, that's really how you start.
That's beautiful. And I appreciate your candor in sharing that, especially the part about, for so many young people. And as a parent, as we both are, we can see this now through the lens of observing our own children as they are growing up and thinking about what they want to be when they grow up. And I think we talked about this a little bit in Vegas. The life journey in pursuing your career is in many ways a constant pursuit of figuring out what we want to be when we grow up, because we're
Yeah.
never really done growing up, right? So, do you find that your role as a mother informs your skills and the rhythm as a plan advisor, and vice versa?
100%, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all teaching each other, right? And if you're not helping people, what are you doing, right? That's really the basis of it. But it's funny, I volunteer through an organization that goes into schools and teaches personal finance and investing 101 and budgeting. I do mock interviews sometimes for high schoolers, but that is really interesting to me because I never got any of that.
Yeah.
And watching these kids, figure out adulting
Yes.
and kind of being a citizen of the world here, um, just keep gaining skills, um, keep being curious, and keep asking questions. That's what I tell my kids.
It's a wonderful metaphor, especially the part about curiosity. And when you can impart that wisdom on young people, it's so valuable. And like you said, when we were in high school, there weren't many opportunities to learn from people outside the classroom other than your teacher. When parents or other professionals from your community would come in and talk about their careers and what they do, it really opens up your horizons. And for those who are curious, it can create great opportunities for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And having kids, that's its own journey, right? That's a full-time job in and of itself. So, um, yeah, one step at a time.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate that. We're going to leave that there because I can't think of a better place to leave our listeners than maintaining curiosity. And I want to thank you, Virginia, for joining us. It's been a great conversation, as these always have been. There's a lot here in the way of takeaways that our plan advisors can benefit from. So for everybody listening, tune in for our next episode of Gray to Great. Thank you, Virginia.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for tuning in to Gray to Great. I hope you're walking away with a few new ideas, a few bold strategies, and a bit more fuel to take your business further than ever. If you found today's conversation valuable, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a colleague. The best way to stay sharp is to keep learning together. So I'll see you next time right here, where we will cut through the noise to bring you what really matters. Until then, keep pushing forward, because there's no gray area in achieving success.